Are there any outstanding concerns from any teams?
Sorry to interrupt. Does OO and CT consent to being recorded in this round? OO and closing government, do you guys mind if you record this debate?
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, we give consent.
All right, thank you.
All right then, I would like to invite the first speaker from government, the Prime Minister, to open this debate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. We think as person X, as a prominent woman within the company that is likely to fail. We think what the narrative you send out, the point in which you deny taking the job of CEO is as follows. Individuals immediately question whether or not you feel you are competent enough to lead the company to success, to bring it out of its recession or its current failing state. We think immediately denying this job immediately and directly concedes to the structures within society that tell you that a woman is incapable of positions of power, that they are unsuited to be in positions of leadership within companies and corporate structure. We think on the very least in our best case scenario, there is a chance for success of the company in which it is spearheaded by a woman, but we will not be negligent and we will still engage on the idea that in instances where it fails, we will number one, tell you why it's unlikely to be to the degree of scapegoating that opposition might bring to you. But number two, why this likelihood, or even if it does happen in our worst case scenario, why it is still beneficial or why we would still prefer this person to take up the job of CEO. Before I move on to the arguments that I'll bring to you in this debate, a few levels of positioning and characterization as to what happens in this debate. We think number one, we have to notice that company Y probably had a male CEO, for example. We think also to note this is a woman that is likely a very legitimate and respectable individual. Recognizing that this was a person in a senior executive position, meaning this is an individual that had years of knowledge and experience within the company. This is an individual that we've seen capable of taking on roles of leadership, as we can tell through like promotions to a higher up position. What is the burden we have to defend on the side of government? We think it's very simple. We think our burden is simply to prove that taking up the mantle of CEO has some beneficial societal consequences and empowers women on the ground. But also key to note is that so long as we can deflect or mitigate as much as the scapegoating as opposition might bring to you, when we can tell you that the perception society have or people around you, the point in which the company might fail, isn't to the extent that they tell you to, that it doesn't validate all these stereotypes against women in the very first place, that we have sufficiently done enough in this debate and we can take it. On the first level of substantive, as to proving to you why taking the power structure such as CEO is beneficial for the entire community or for feminism in general. We think number 1A, it allows you to break the narrative that women are simply not good enough to compete for corporate leadership. We do recognize that there's a possibility of failure, but we think that small chance of success overrides the overwhelming risk. Because notice the harms are symmetrical in both worlds. In both worlds, the point in which you deny it, the societal perception or the perception you have within the company or from individuals around you is that you are a lackluster individual that was not competent enough to take up the CEO position and you denied it anyway. We think these are instances in which the harms are going to accrue on both sides of the house. We think then what is the most strategic move to take would be to then take the position of CEO. We think number one, there are several reasons as to why society won't perceive this, or even if instances where it fails, the scapegoating isn't as harsh as that opposition might bring to you. Few levels of characterization. We think number one, there is a sufficient track record to prove to you that prior to the hiring of this individual, this was a company that was likely to fail. Things like company analysts or risk assessment within the company that individuals that you hire can tell you that the company was probably doomed to fail regardless. We think the point in which the company fails when you also issue a public statement, it also is not you also issue the reasons as to what happened during the leadership and prior to it. Number two, I think you can easily point out the very fact that the failings of the company was never attributed to you, because prior to your appointment as CEO, the person that was in charge of leading the company, the person that put you in the rabbit hole that you are currently in, was a male individual, the person stereotyped in society to be able to have the capacity to lead companies that are the best suited individuals to do so. We think this is a narrative you can also push, that the failings of the company was attributed to a man in the first place. We think this at the best neutralizes the kinds of gender discrimination you face and the scapegoating on the basis of gender. We think then, number three, that it's extremely hard to believe that prior to the company failing, for example, in our worst case, that all of a sudden the company completely takes a 180 and shifts CEOs for no apparent reason other than the fact that they wanted to scapegoat this individual. We don't think society will easily buy into the narratives that a woman is incompetent and was the sole reason the company failed. We think realistically individuals can't attribute the entire company's failings to a single individual. You hire individuals to help build the company. You have company analysts and advisors to tell you what to do. These are also individuals equally held responsible and accountable, especially the individual that put you in this position in the first place. We think what is then more important is that you inspire individuals and people on the ground. Notice your principal standing is that you as an individual, as a woman, as a feminist, believe that there is a possibility for you, or you believe that women should be able to proceed into positions of power. We think the impacts of this, the point which you're able to reach that CEO position, is to empower all women on the ground that were previously told it was an impossible feat, that merely you're unable to attain this kind of leadership because women aren't suited to be in the corporate world. Even in the mere fact that this individual fails, even in the very worst case, why is this still a preferable decision for you to take it? We don't think you can completely destroy or discredit women entirely of the failings of one individual or one woman. But number two, this does not discredit all the previous achievements this individual has earned. This person being a senior advisor in a company, probably being one of the higher ups in the board of directors in the first place. Even if you fail, you still empower women on the ground, but you don't have a concession that you are unable to attain it in the very first place. We think the very mere fact that you're able to even reach this position in the first place sparks an impetus for all women across the ground. We think that in the best case scenario, and notice this is where we have overwhelming social benefit. Number one, you completely destroy the patriarchal structures telling you you can't succeed. But number two, you empower women on the ground on a gigantic magnitude. We think this is something we think is preferable. We think this woman should take up the job of CEO. Proud to propose.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. I'm genuinely sorry. I will take 1 minute and I will quickly return. I'm truly sorry for the interruption, but I would now like to invite the leader of opposition to open the case for the opposition bench.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
All right, give me a second. Right, okay. Sorry, give me a second. I need to set a timer first. Right. Panel, for centuries, women have been the bottom of our society and have been have been suffering because of this society in itself. And that's why our side strictly urges that should not take the job of the CEO. For many centuries, the women have been slave to this patriarchal society um, uh, because people think that women should not have more control or that women should not have equal opportunities as men do, and women have been getting unequal pay wage and things like that. And we know that women are already suffering, and that they are vulnerable, and society thinks that a woman is incapable. And for this reason, I would like to go on to my first rebuttal, that the proposition made about the scapegoating. They think that the scapegoating might not be very likely, and even if it is, it will not do many harm. But we will say that this is one of the worst harm that will happen. That would happen uh, to the feminist movement. But even if the scapegoating is not the worst, what is worse is the broken image of the feminist movement. Yes, it's one woman, X. The X is might fail in this company, but it will represent a lot of women that people think that she is incapable of doing so. The opposition have given you many. The proposition have given you many cases where people might not look upon the woman that she is a very capable woman, but we see that this during a recession, people would likely most blame someone and generalize that she is the reason to be that the company has fallen, and that it's much worse when she agrees to this job and thinking that she might succeed. Instead, the company has already predicted the future of the company that it would fail. Now, scapegoating is very likely because in a scenario where the company's interest is to blame someone, which is X, that means they've predicted it carefully that there is no more outcome, and that therefore that this is the best interest in the company to hire one that might fail. Now, before we go on to my issues, what are the clarifications? What is the goal of the feminist movement or women empowerment? Which is women empowerment. Women are taken seriously in the working world, and that they are looked as scapegoat. That's what the goal of the woman empowerment, and that they are seen as capable of running business as men are. For example, the CEO of COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, and she indeed made Facebook more successful, and they took women more seriously, and that's why it's possible that women can even step into this workforce. But moving on to my two issues of why is our side more beneficial to the feminist movement, and second of all, why it is justified for her to decline the job. Now, we know that women are already seen as weak and incapable in the workforce, but if she were to take the job, it's likely that a company would fail because of her, it's likely that company would not fail because of her, but the fact that she is already declining, that the company is in a recession. However, her colleagues and other businesses and even female workers wouldn't already know this, right? The world wouldn't know the intentions of the company. And these reports are usually accessible by the board or a few high-ranking members in society. They told you that there are company analysis, but the fact that they are willing to take her as scapegoat, which the company will be trying to hide this as much as possible. When her male colleagues see that the company is going on a decline, they will think that, well, the women are actually capable of working, thus they should not be trusted in having higher positions. Similarly, her female colleagues would lose all hope they had. Maybe they've already had hope that women could empower the workforce, but seeing as the company is declining under her leadership, they would not even attempt to bring the movement of losing this losing this sexist society anywhere. What will this result in? Obviously, the follower of the feminist movement will decline, and fighting their rights will actually believe in the narrative that women cannot work. This is extremely harmful because if female colleagues don't even believe in women, who will, right? But also the other businesses looking that the company is in a decline, given that they don't know it was her fault and she was a scapegoat, they will potentially not give any more leadership positions to women, as they are afraid their company will experience the same fate. comparatively under our side, if they don't take this job, they can take other potential jobs where it is more promising, and this is not only good for their individual career but also the image of women. Now, why is this possible? Because other companies still believe in the feminist movement, and therefore it's very possible that other position jobs are offered in other companies. And why is it justified for her? And second of all, my issue of why is it justified for her to decline the job? Now, given that the premise, even though she is a feminist fighting for the woman in power, the only reason she wants this is for the negative connotation of women in the workforce to change. This obviously does not happen if she accepts the job, right? So what would happen if she accepts the job? Would the feminist movement be okay with this? Would people be okay with this narrative that she is incapable? No, they would criticize her, and they would attack her regardless of the facts that perhaps that the company is in recession. That's why we need to understand that first. But second of all, that remember that the feminist movement is to fight for women empowerment. However, taking the job will not only allow for any forms of empowerment, it will only ruin the reputation of X and the feminist movement. On their side, they give you claims that states that this X would still be respected because of her previous work, but by no means this would ruin her reputation, and even for the future. And on our side of the house, what it looks like when X declines the job. First and foremost, declining the job doesn't mean that she isn't capable. It's that it shows rational thinking that it will benefit the feminist movement. And 3 reasons why it's true. First of all, the X would know that it's the wisest opportunity, it's the wisest action to take for the future, and she might even lead in other job opportunities, stating that she is a potential candidate, and that is why we're proud to oppose.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. I would now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case. Guys, feel free to offer POIs in the manner that was described by the tournament organizing committee in the briefing early in the day.
Chair, we think a lot of things that the side of opposition wants to talk to us about. Things like the woman getting attacked, things like the woman becoming a scapegoat, things like people assuming that the woman just isn't capable of handling stressful situations, or is the reason behind a lot of failure, is already status quo. Individuals within corporate circles and the elite bubbles, especially in industries like this, where we can assume is already male dominated, a lot of individuals already have this perception. I don't think a lot changes with another woman only solidifying this position if she fails. I think that a lot of harms they talk about already happen in status quo, and it doesn't really change much. The question then is, on which side do we have a chance to prove this otherwise, and should we even take that risk to begin with, because is the benefits or is the potential benefits overwhelming? But secondly, what are these small things that you can achieve as CEO that even if you fail, it's still okay? I think the point at which the side of opposition says things like the woman should just get a job somewhere else in another company. I think this is an extremely selfish decision to make, simply because the woman is then prioritizing her own success, her own career, and her own reputation, and leaving behind a whole other bunch of women within the same company who will be demotivated, seeing someone, because the narrative then is the woman left because she simply couldn't take up the challenge. I still think that the woman has a responsibility to give up certain things like her potential reputation, things like her career, etc. Because number one, she's already in a position of power. I think she still has some amount of financial stability to ensure that she will still be able to survive. But secondly, the very fact that she has come to that position means that the the communities behind her or before her, all the women before her who had to sacrifice certain things and who worked hard, so she has the position and the agency to even be appointed, means she has an obligation towards the towards the feminist movement and towards all the women that she leaves behind. I think, given this characterization, the woman should not make the selfish decision, and the decision to leave is one that will be extremely counterproductive to anything that she believes in. Firstly, they say that the scapegoating will be worse because people will blame it on her and the company will position it such. I think a few responses to this. Firstly, we think that we can, even if the reports are not public yet, we can still publicize it. And given the woman now is a CEO, and to assume both benefits on both worlds, on their world, if it's going to be such a great impact to the feminist movement and the scapegoating is going to be so large that it's going to affect thousands of women, the company has to be to some level reputable, a national company with some level of agency within the country and some level of fame. So I think that a lot of times reports are public and are accessible to the public when it's a large company with shareholders all over the country. Given this, I think that it's very obvious that the woman and the agency she has, or the media time that she has, she's able to explain that the company was already doing badly, and I think that people are able to accept it to some level. But even if they don't, I don't think anything changes because they already believe that women aren't capable to begin with. Secondly, they say that the reputation is extremely bad and people think women aren't able to work. They need to tell us how this changes on their world and how she leaving then changes this narrative, because I think things will just remain the same. And in fact, it's a wash, because on their world, maybe she'll be deemed as a failure because she was not able to bring up the company. But on our, we think she's deemed a failure. But on our, maybe she's deemed as a failure if she fails with the company. But on their world, she's deemed as a failure as well for not even taking up the challenge, and she's already seen to have failed the challenge to begin with. We think on both worlds it's neutral. The question then is, what can she achieve as CEO that is extremely important? A few things. Firstly, we think that the financial gains or the monetary gains in that time is extremely important to her being able to further the goals of the feminist movement. So she being able to, for example, earn large paychecks and donate more to the movement, become an advocate for the movement. And I think that recognizing that the movement needs more women within the corporate circle to get things like donations, to support the feminist movement through campaigns, which she, being in a position of the CEO, can use she has a company budget to be able to be disposed. For example, we think she's able to pick and choose CSR projects which can actively benefit the feminist movement, and we think that this is how more women are able to be helped. Secondly, we think the policies she makes is extremely important. Even if it's for a short time and we assume she might fail, we think that the policies she's able to generate in that time of being CEO is extremely important. So things like more maternity leave, things like paid maternity leave, things like anti-discrimination or harassment policies within the company, things like anti-discrimination when it comes to promotions within the company. These are all policies she's able to promote and enact within the company. Why will these policies likely to stay? Even if she leaves and another male individual comes back, we think it will be extremely detrimental to their image to remove bad policies and retract bad policies, because it just looks like they're being extremely discriminatory and bad. We think the time that she has to enact policies is extremely important and is able to uplift the women within that same environment. But lastly, we think the empowerment that it gives women, like the very point at which we even get a woman to that position, given that a lot of times women just miss it by a fluke shot, and women oftentimes stay at the very best, say at senior executive levels, and just never go up to C levels, and it's just very rare. We think the empowerment that this is just possible, and the possibility of this empowers a lot of more women to continue the fight and to continue staying in the corporate ladder, because the chances is there and they know it's a possibility. Before that, POI.
Yes, you mentioned that even if they fail, then at least they can initiate certain CSR initiatives, so on and so forth. But given that this point's premise on the fact that you say, even if she failed, so if she fails, the company is likely to go bankrupt and shut down. So how does the relief measures or anything that she initiates have a long-term effect?
think that there's a lot of reasons why even if the company goes bankrupt, we think that yes, we won't have these policies, but this is a risk we're willing to take because the benefits are overarching. But here's just a few reasons why the company wouldn't go bankrupt, right? So just because we are in a recession doesn't mean that a lot of companies just don't close down. Like it just isn't as simplistic as they think it is. Things like bailouts are actively available from governments and can be actively sought out. Secondly, things like cost-cutting measures which CEOs always take to begin with, things like just having to fire staff or having to shift the company's production to another sector which is more profitable at that time. All these things are measures the women can make and do make in society today, which is why it's not just because a company is at recession doesn't mean the company is straight away going to go bankrupt. We think these are all measures that the state does take, and because we are debating in a world where this company has to be a big company and has to be a reputable one for all our benefits on both worlds or harms to occur, we think that there are measures that the woman is able to take, and the company won't just go bankrupt like that. Given this, we think that on their world, the narrative gets worse. Even at best, it's neutralized because on both worlds, the woman is likely to be failed. The question then is there benefits that are able to be sought in that time? And we think the three benefits that we've talked to you about, the empowerment, the money, and the airtime and the policies the woman is able to enact, and even the trend analysis of those policies within the corporate circle. There's the point at which one company enacts those policies. Even if that company shuts down, there's still the trend analysis and the women realizing that this is possible and these policies are important, means it spreads within other companies and it becomes a trend within companies. I think these are overarching benefits that come with having a woman CEO, even if it's for a short time, even if she's deemed to be a failure. We think that she has a responsibility to take this risk, even if her personal reputation is damaged. The overarching benefits to the community, which she owes an obligation to, is overarching. Hence, very proud to propose.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. I would now like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the debate.
Am I audible?
Yes, but if you could speak a little bit louder.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let me put on my stopwatch. Okay. Panel, I don't think the opening government realizes how victimized and oppressed women is in society, vulnerable they are, and how much, how the responsibility of all of this, all the conflicts shouldn't be placed on them. Woman is a vulnerable, and that is why we are so proud to oppose. Before I move on to my issues, a few clarifications and extraneous rebuttals. The OG talked about how, because this is a patriarchal society, it's likely that nothing will really change. But this just doesn't make sense. My first speaker already proved to you why, how in corporations, women in the company, how when this fails, the magnitude of impact is so large. Firstly, how the woman in the company will obviously lose hope, seeing that even under the leadership of a woman, their company fails. Other companies wouldn't want to hire women to positions of leadership because they saw a company under a woman fail. And obviously the male colleagues will use this as ammunition to even to really promote their narrative of why women shouldn't be able to run a company, right? It's not a small impact. This magnitude is huge. But secondly, I just don't understand why women have to take on this personal burden, because women are the one right now who are already victimized. They are the vulnerable. It's not fair for them to put this responsibility on women, at least in our side of the house. When the company fails, the men are the ones who's going to take responsibility. The men are the one who is at fault. But thirdly, talking about personal reputation, no. First of all, we have to understand that this isn't just her personal reputation, but this woman literally represents the entire feminist movement and women in general. So having any blemishes on her reputation would obviously impact the feminist movement as a whole. So moving on to my three issues. Firstly, why is scapegoating principally unacceptable? Secondly, why this woman shouldn't take the opportunity available? And thirdly, why our house will ensure that woman X's well-being, as well as other women in the workforce, will be better. So firstly, why is scapegoating principally unacceptable?
So we have to understand that like scapegoating will just allow like this woman disenfranchisement in society to continue, and this cycle of being stripped and oppressed of opportunities, right? A world where every failure is painted as being the cause of a female CEO, even though it's rare, even though like not every woman in power will obviously fail. We know that in the small things that they do, they'll dominate the world of the corporate world, will use this ammunition to even further their narrative. We know that even though it's not likely to happen, that a lot of times they will just use anything to promote their narrative because they are the ones in power and they have the power to do this, right? But secondly, onto my issue about why a woman X should take the other opportunities available. The opposition told you that, like, you know, she's respected and it won't be hard for her to make the company successful. But no, given that this company is already in a downfall and the company knows that, it's likely that the rest of the company won't even try to save this declining company, given the fact that they already have a scapegoat and the responsibility and blood won't be on their hands, right? But secondly, it's likely that she will be someone who is actually, it's also unlikely that she will be someone who's capable of this position. We know that a lot of times a company will not choose her based on the level of skill, but in fact, they would just try to find a woman that can make a fool of herself to put the blame of the company on her, right? Then the company will choose her, like, not for the right reasons. If they're actually capable and make it successful, they wouldn't want it to go to the woman, the credit to the woman, because that's the nature of this patriarchal society that we live in. They don't want to see this woman succeed because she would be a threat to men, a threat to their positions, and a threat of this status quo that they live in, which is already benefiting the male gender. But thirdly, even if we buy into the characterization, even if she's actually like that iconic person that people look up to, the most strategic action to take is not for her to take a failing company that will have the harms of the promotion of like this false narrative. Obviously, this company is not even gender friendly. They treat women like shit, and the fact that they are choosing women just because like they are failing. So in the best case scenario where she makes it to be successful, she only provides ammunition for this type of cooperation to actually continue existing, for these types of businesses to still exist in the status quo. Because seeing as she only allows for this sort of company to continue and portraying the narrative that it's okay for companies to treat women like this, and it's okay for even a feminist to be a part and support a cooperation that is so harmful to the female gender. Yeah, maybe she could get those big paychecks in her CEO positions, but it's unlikely that this is going to happen because obviously they are a declining company. And even if she gets it, there has been no process analysis on why she would actually donate to these like cooperations and institutions. But thirdly, the fact that the feminists like supporting a leading cooperation that is made up of sexist people, that is already like a bad like image on her. Instead of taking up this company, she should instead make her own business or even go to a more woman-friendly cooperation. She can make a business that has more woman-friendly policies, hiring women, sexual assault policy, like free tampons in the toilet. We know that this would be unlikely when she is stuck in that cooperation where obviously her colleagues and her the makeup of the company in itself is already made up of people who buy into those patriarchal beliefs, right? Given that the fact that she is capable, it won't be too hard for her to be able to reach a higher position in a different cooperation. But thirdly, onto my third clash, why our house will ensure this woman's well-being as well as other women's, right? The fact that this cooperation is harmful, the fact that they're using her as a scapegoat or even choosing her as a CEO when their company is failing means that they obviously buy into patriarchal beliefs. They are a sexist company that does not look that does not look a woman as equal, right? With this in mind, so that means that even in the best case scenario where like her position her position will be successful, it won't actually like promote the narrative what the feminist movement is fighting for. It will only promote this narrative that the cooperation has, this patriarchal beliefs. In the best case scenario where her position of power will allow her to make policies or make it more woman friendly, we tell you that this is unlikely. It's unlikely that she'll hire more women or share her spot with other. We know that her position, being a CEO of a declining company, actually is a very prestigious position to be in, and it is something that she would take pride in. But to give an example of why it's unlikely to help her like with the feminist movement and other women is because we know that the queen bee attitude is very common. We know that many times women who killed themselves to be successful in being in position will not help other women to like in the cooperation, because obviously it wouldn't make their position that prestigious. It isn't likely that all of her hardships she will use to advocate for the power of women. On the comparative, under our side, where her level of success is higher and her hardships experience is less, what is likely is that she'll be more willing to help other women and help them flourish. As we stand for women in the workforce, we want a world where patriarchal societies vanish. We want a world where women do have the position of authority, and this is only exclusive under our side. We are so proud to oppose. Thank you.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. I would now like to invite the member of government to continue the debate.
From the start, I want to deal with the point that was raised by our opponents, that women gatekeep other women. We simply think that's not true, right? Based on the same logic, you'll also have white men gatekeeping other white men from leadership positions, and that's why then logically you should get more minority representation at upper level management. But that's simply not what happens, right? We think that when you have a female CEO in that capacity, in such a monumental and important role inside the company, they actually incentivize and serve as an inspiration for existing female employees of the company to rise up the ranks and provide a living example to them to show that the glass ceiling is necessarily false, that they themselves have the potential to rise up to the same ranks as they do. So we think that from that, we're going to contextualize a bit differently from our opening. Right? We're going to focus on the individual responsibility to corporation and how this can be reconciled with their belief in feminism, right? Right. So we think that, first of all, the points on scapegoating from coming from opposition side are that it's not necessarily true. Right? Scapegoating is unlikely to happen.
I would like to stop you for a moment.
Yeah.
Am I the only one, and I'd like confirmation from other people in this room who finds
I couldn't hear properly either.
So basically your voice is like maybe not on focus on the microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah, this is fine.
So I think I have. Should I restart?
I think so, because you weren't too far into the speech.
Right. Okay. I think what needs to happen in this debate is a recontextualization. First, I want to deal with women gatekeeping other women. We simply think that's not true. By the same logic, old white men would also gatekeep old white men and introduce more minorities into the workplace. But that's simply not what happens. Women inside a leadership capacity, as important as the CEO, serve as an inspiration to other women inside the company to show to provide a living example to show that they themselves are also able to rise to such ranks inside a company, right? This destroys their very own internalized oppression coming from the patriarchy about how they aren't able to achieve such corporate roles because of gatekeeping. We think that the women inside these CEO positions fundamentally change that. We're going to be somewhat different from our opening by framing the debate as the women's responsibility to the corporation and how that can be reconciled with their individualized notions of feminism. Right. So first, let's respond to let's respond to the opposition case about scapegoating. First off, it's not necessarily true. Scapegoating is unlikely to happen when a company itself is already poorly, right? You place anybody in the job, the same result would likely happen. That they'll likely continue to have bad performance. Secondly, even if that's not true, what incentive would upper management have to place unqualified candidates in the role, right? Like, why would you want to put an unqualified woman in the role just so that you can blame her? Aside from the sense of moral victory gained from other males, what tangible benefits does it bring? We think that this likely harms number one, the prospects of the company in the future, and which in turn harms the own career prospects of the people who made that decision. So we think that when there's a time of crisis in the corporation, the companies will be incentivized to select the most competent and best person for the job, So the scapegoating is less likely to happen in the first place because the reputation of that person precedes them when they were being selected into the job. This is especially true for women. In upper management roles, if a woman were to exist there, we think that they are likely more competent than her male peers, because she had to battle the kinds of obstacles institutionalized inside a company to get where she was in the first place. So we think that women inside upper management actually make a better candidate than males when there's a crisis in the company. So we think that and because of that, women are also more likely to turn things around in a company when they're placed into these capacities. So in the board, secondly, talking about the corporate structure itself, the CEO isn't an absolute monarch in the company. They also have to listen to the board of directors and investors. But fundamentally, they also need to have the support of these two stakeholders, right? When a CEO is placed into a role and they don't have the support of their board of directors, like Marissa Mayer, who was a woman in Yahoo during 2014 when the company was doing poorly, we think that yes, they're likely to fail, but there's a reason for their failure too, not just the fact that they're a woman, right? What happened in the aftermath of Marissa Mayer's term at Yahoo was a media expose and a media campaign written about the glass cliff itself, right? We think that by failing, the female CEOs also inspire discussion about prevailing biases within the board of directors and upper management against them, and which causes them to fail in the first place, right? So Yahoo's upper management actually came under fire from the media and wider society for being uncooperative with this female CEO. We think that even if the individual accrues the harms, even if the individual's own reputation is harmed by this, we think that this will pave the way for future generations of women to, better have a chance at the upper management role. I'll take you.
So you mentioned how failing can start a discussion. The same effect can be achieved by the female executive simply refusing the role and then starting a discussion about why she refused the role in the first place and talking about the presence of the glass cliff.
Okay, look, the level of exposure is just simply different, right? Even if you have women inside upper management roles in a company, they're likely invisible because people don't really see the board of directors as the figurehead for the company, right? The CEO is the person that manages the company and that the media associates with the company. By having a woman inside that role, you also create the image of X company being a company run by a woman, right? That in itself is a powerful narrative that only our side can bring. Because when you constantly have males inside these roles, it makes it very hard for the company to convince people otherwise that they're making genuine efforts towards gender inclusion or gender equality inside the workplace, etc. We think that even if you don't have any tangible benefits, the perception itself is quite powerful and can already affect the perception of wider society towards that company. Right. So moving on to talk about male coworkers, okay? Before that, some context. So we think already the harms that they portray aren't as severe as we think, right? There's already organic changes in the status quo that is happening, that is actively trying to address these biases within the workplace, right? Like blind auditions, eliminate management opinion in favor of objective performance reviews based on metrics. We think that these are all ways that companies are doing right now to include women and more women participating in this upper level management. So when this female X takes the job of CEO, we think that number one, there's likely to be some members of the board of management or the upper level management that will already be women in the first place. But secondly, that there will be more incoming because of that, right? In the times of crisis, we think that this benefit is magnified. When you have a company that prides itself on being a meritocracy and you don't have any women inside these roles, you create the perception towards other people that women simply aren't good enough. That's why they're not being promoted, right? Even if they don't have any of these sexist biases that you would like to point out. We think that simply by perception, having these women inside a role serves as an inspiration for other female employees within the company, and Their unique status inside upper level management in the first place makes them more likely to succeed. For these reasons, happy to propose. Thank you.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. I would now like to invite the member of opposition to continue the debate.
Okay, hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Starting in 3, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have had a pretty unstructured debate where both sides have refused to agree on the likeliness of the CEO doing well and also on the public narrative that will result. So today, what I'm going to do is consider both situations and tell you why. Firstly, if people think she's responsible, the overall the movement still fails. And secondly, even if people know that this woman has been scapegoated, it still perpetrates a toxic narrative for the feminist movement and the disadvantages the female herself. But before that, some rebuttals, right? So I think closing's extension was pretty much derivative of opening. So most of what I rebut in them will also be applicable to closing. But firstly, on the idea about how you'll be able to break the narrative, right? So side opening government came up and told us about how there's a small chance of success and the harms are symmetrical, and how if you don't take the role, people will say you're weak or say that you're a failure, right? We don't think this is likely because you have to look at the way media commercial releases are written, right? Firstly, if people chosen for a CEO position decide not to take the role, it isn't headline news, it isn't that big of a deal. Usually, the only mention of this kind of situation will be when the new CEO is appointed and say the board also considered blah, blah, blah. It isn't going to be huge thing like, oh, headline breaking news, oh, this person decided to turn down the role, therefore she's weak. There's no such discussion around this kind of topic because it isn't that big of an issue. And you can choose to not broadcast the fact that this person is not taking the job, right? I don't see why you're saying like it would blow up and have such a huge impact among people if she decides not to take the role. Secondly, according to side opening, they also told us about how the public are very perceptive, right? About how they will understand that the woman isn't solely responsible for the failure. Under this logic, we think that the public will also be able to understand that the woman is being scapegoated and see the truth about why she's receiving this position. And we think that this perpetuates a toxic narrative that I'll be going into in my speech later. Next, they also talked about how the woman is unlikely to have all the failures attributed to her, about how people can understand, oh, the company was already failing, the company can go public and tell them about the situation. Firstly, we think that it's not likely that the company itself will be incentivized to go out and say, oh, the failing is because we as a company are doing badly, not because of our CEO. We think that it's likely for the companies to want to push everything onto the CEO who can take the fall, then quietly be fired and be replaced by a man so that the same status quo and the same pyramid of privileges can be continued. No, thank you. I also think that it's also very harmful. No, thank you to the POI. I also think that it's also very harmful in any case because even if the harm's not attributed to her, we create this narrative where we think, oh, we only give this kind of leadership role to women when it's doomed, when nobody else wants to take it, when we have no option other than to give it to a woman who has a slim hope of rescuing the situation because we don't want to give it to anyone else. No one wants to take it. We think that this is a very harmful narrative. Nextly, what side closing told us about how by failing, there's a discussion about glass cliff and how also somehow there will be an image of women as strong leaders, right? Firstly, we think that they're contradicting themselves by saying that women can be seen as strong, but also there'll be a discussion about women are only put in this kind of conversation because people think they're incapable and can't do anything. So we think this is very harmful. No, thank you to POI. So moving on to my substantive. Firstly, on how it's harmful if people genuinely think she's responsible and people attribute the blame to her. So I am going to be the only person who gives you concrete mechanization of why the situation is actually out of the female CEO's control and why she would be very unlikely to be able to turn the situation around. Understand that we're not just talking about the company doing it badly individually as a company. A recession is a result of a global financial landscape and because of the banking situation, which makes it very hard for the CEO to do something. However, we see that people still don't think the public doesn't understand this, right? We can see this in things like presidential elections in the US, where the business dealings, no thank you, of the US are attributed to individual presidents instead of people understanding that there's ups and downs in the global financial landscape. What we think is going to be likely to happen is people don't understand that it's truly because of the global landscape. The board therefore has an excuse to fire this female CEO after recession. After the recession is concluded in order to replace her with a male, the person who they actually want for the job. And we think that this is extremely harmful for various reasons, right? We think that this is harmful because it perpetrates a narrative that no thank you, females are are incapable of doing anything. We think that her mistakes will be amplified. And this is really bad for the society in the long term, right? We think in the long term, this means that the board and corporate management in general have less incentive to put women in positions of authority, because they can point to things like this and say, this is why we shouldn't have women in positions of authority. Yes.
So
Yes.
so by that logic, should you also only promote women in times when the company is very successful?
No, I'm saying that we should promote women. I'm saying that in this case, a woman should not take the job, because it's obvious that it's a case of the glass cliff where she's being promoted not because of her talent or because the board believes she can lead them out of the situation, but because the board knows that they are going to be facing a recession and therefore they need someone to take the fall. These are two completely different rationale and situations, right? So moving on to my point. Next point, I also think the role of CEO specifically is very detrimental to the feminist movement, and it's very detrimental, and it's more likely that she'll be scapegoated because she's CEO. We see that in the current business landscape. The CEO enjoys kind of a cult of personality, where the success and failure of different of a company is attributed to that person specifically. Look at examples like Steve Jobs, like Elon Musk. They see as personally responsible for the success and failure of a company. What this means is that if the female CEO fails, we think that there will be harms that are unique, no thank you, harms that are unique only to our side, and we think that this is very harmful. On the other hand, the comparative is if she doesn't take the job, she can stay on as senior executive in the company. We think that senior executive is also a very admirable role that shows that females can take leadership roles and can choose their own career decisions, right? We think that the positive signaling effect of her being in this kind of senior executive role is also has the kind of benefit without having the trade-off of her having to take all the responsibility, no thank you, for the performance of a company, right? Nextly, on what would happen if people know she's scapegoated, how the benefits that you mentioned would not materialize, right? We think that it's obvious in this case, the meaning behind the promotion is not a genuine acknowledgement of the woman's ability. It's more of an idea that you can take the fall now so that a better male CEO can take back the helm within the company. It will be acknowledged that this is the case, right? So what's going to happen if she knows that she's being scapegoated and she takes a position because she wants to promote feminism? People might not see it that way. People might think, oh, she's kind of selling out the feminist movement in order to earn more money as a CEO or in order for her personal career advancement. So this is very detrimental for the feminist movement, as people within the company will be even more betrayed on our side, right? On the so we think that this is highly detrimental. And also, even if people know she's being scapegoated, this still has a negative effect on feminist movement in the long term, right? Why? Because we see that women are only promoted because people expect them to take the fall for certain situations, or because people don't actually believe in their ability. This is highly discouraging for women, and it also creates a perception. And if the woman is fired after the recession, it also creates a perception that women can't make mistakes. They'll be held even more responsible than other CEOs for the kind of mistakes or the bad judgment that they have, right? This results in people being even more discouraged from taking female leadership positions because they feel like they're not genuinely valued, or feel like they're only taking roles when nobody else wants to do it, right? So because of these reasons, because I've told you why exactly the woman is likely to not do well, and why the public will believe that it's her personal failing, while in the company, even if they know she's being scapegoated, there will still be a negative effect. Very, very proud to oppose.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. I would now like to invite the government whip to close the case for the government bench.
My time starts now. So first of all, I'm going to do a few rebuttals from my opponent's last speech, and I'm going to further elaborate on why our team is the best and why our team has like the best solution to this problem. So first of all, rebutting my opponent's case, my opponent's second speech. So first of all their case is based on the fact that they think that these men are better than women and that these women are weak. So in their cases, it's kind of contradictory, as they're trying to tell everybody that their cases that these women are like weak and that they shouldn't take the pressure, and that we don't have the right to give them the pressure. But then at the same time, they talk about how this woman is strong enough to like sacrifice for the people, and why it's okay that she sacrifices herself for the greater good of the feminism movement. But then what we're saying, and what my other speaker has said previously, is that these women are at least more competent than the men in the companies, as they had to fight through all the sexism, they had to fight through all the challenges in front of them in order to get the CEO position. So all the other teams right now are saying that this woman is just like a puppet, and the woman is just put there so that she could fail. But that's not true. all my opponents are looking at a very pessimistic observation where they think that the woman is just promoted into CEO just because these people want her to fail. But then that is not necessarily the case. Since it's 2020 today, we see a huge improvement in gender rights, and who knows, maybe the woman got promoted because of her better skills and because of like the previous CEO believed in her that she could make a change. So this is just really unclear, like why these women should be sacrificed and put into this like sacrificial manner, even when she is like actually a strong person and can actually have the ability to turn around the company. So continuing on, this debate is not only about like the feminist movement. This is also talking about like the effects on the company and like the effects on the feminism in general. So if these women are like as strong as I just proved to you, then there is just a better chance that she would turn the company around. So my previous speaker talked about how we should elect like previous men from the company to become CEO. But then what our response to this is that once the men got elected, the company will quickly just fall into chaos and get bankrupt, as these men are not like familiar with the CEO job, and they're usually like more incompetent than the woman, as they think that they are selected because they're better, but they're actually selected because of the sexism in the company. So and to continue on, my opponent also talked about like the severe consequences if the woman was to fail. But the truth is that these companies are already failing. Like my opponent gave you the example of Mark Zuckerberg and like the CEO of other famous companies. But then let me first ask you a question, Judge. Why do we know about these CEOs? It's because these companies are extremely successful and are like multi-billion-dollar like companies. But then if the company was to fail, we wouldn't share that much about the company, as people wouldn't really like care about the situation. Like even if the woman was to fail, people would just look at the company and be like, well, the company must fail because she's a woman, and just move on to like other sorts of headlines. And just because the woman failed doesn't mean that the whole feminist movement will be like in danger, as this will actually have like a very positive effect on feminist movements, as we think that once the female is risen into the CEO position, she will try her best to hire more and more women into the company to try to like test more innovative ideas and to change the company. So when there's nothing at stake and when the company is almost dead, we believe that we can rely on the women to use more and more innovative ideas, including more women in the workforce, and like using policies that can also like benefit women in like the process. So even if the company fails, people will see that this company is a company where feminism has like swept across, and it can also like raise more and more attention. Like for example, if there was a multi-billion company such as maybe like Facebook that had a CEO, that had a female CEO, and she failed, but then she proved to everybody that the company could actually have feminist policies, then other companies and smaller companies and big companies at the same time will also adapt like more female workers and more female policies. So we think that this company so there's two scenarios for the companies itself. So first of all is that the woman makes a great job in using more innovative ideas, in like hiring more women and like turning the company around, and that people will see that women can actually finish the job and like turn the company around. The second situation is where the company goes bankrupt, but then the effects of these feminist policies is still in effect. So we believe that as the closing government side, we really have nothing to lose, and by the woman taking this job, it can actually have like lots of like pros to this world. So first of all, well, of course, they can have like a higher chance of reversing the company and promoting more gender rights and gender equality. And second, the fact that the female is in the CEO position means that she has more power, not only in the company, but also in the society itself. Imagine if there was a female CEO in Facebook that was the CEO, then of course, she is going to be richer. She's going to have more like attention, more money, and using this money, she can also bring like more positive change and more positive changes to the community. Okay, another point the last speaker pointed out was that the the female should like go like make her own company and like start her own company instead. So our response to this is that once the woman makes enough change in society, and once the woman proves to everybody that female policies can be made, we encourage these women to get out of the CEO position and to like start a company by themselves to like promote gender equality. And this will even be like a better situation, as these females already have like a wide reputation because of the previous CEO placement. So if they started a new company, this will actually have a bigger effect on the female rally itself. So we believe that this is like actually the best way for the female to help like the feminism movement in general, and that is by making enough reputation and money so that they can make their own organizations, make their own companies, and like bring further changes into the world in the future. So to sum it up, our side is the only side that provides like a win-win situation for both the woman, the company, and the feminist movements. And we don't have to sacrifice any like sacrificial chip to the company. So that's why we proudly propose.
I would like to thank that speaker for their fine speech. I would now like to invite the opposition whip to close the case for the opposition bench and this debate as a whole.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Right, thank you. By the way, I would prefer POIs come in the chat if that's possible. Thank you. Look, under government benches paradigm, they basically assume that your local farmer, for example, in rural US, is going to look at a stock plummeting and then actually go online and do research about this new female executive and think that, oh, she's been scapegoated. She's been actually placed into this position and it's a trap. And then he's going to realize that this was all a misogynistic practice. They're basically assuming that the local grocery store owner would actually do all of their own calculations and figure out, though, this female executive was actually pretty good. She has a pretty good profile, and then not blame her, even though all his livelihood good savings have already gone into ruin. We don't think that is the sort of general public that we can fairly expect in any sort of debate, right? Note that the general public probably doesn't have any sort of expertise in these fields, and we don't think that they'll be privy to the internal dealings and the internal profiles of these female executives anyway. We don't think that this is the cherry-picked characterization that's very fair for this debate. We think it's quite convenient for government bench. We don't agree with that at all. And before that, a few strategic clarifications, right? Firstly, note that this motion is not a recession, right? We don't think it's been fairly explained in any of the other three houses. We think that especially government bench seems to portray a recession on a scale of like a minor corporate crisis, which is like much less than what it really is. Secondly, note that we are the only house that really explained to you through Kylie's speech the current norm and the corporate culture and the status quo. And we don't think that was sufficiently explained by any of the other three houses. Thirdly, note that government bench has been very willing to concede the huge risk that basically this woman will lead the company into ruin no matter her ability, right? Despite not explaining how that risk exists, we think we need to point out that means that government sees a lot of ground, since most of our harms after the company collapses always materialize, whereas all of their benefits are only tangential because they haven't really been able to like conclusively prove that they aren't like they're going to be constructive and not like it's a wash on both sides, right? But more importantly, I need to repeat that Kylie's pointing out of Sichi's contradiction is very crucial in defeating the entire case, right? Because note that how people can get inspired by this leader's ability and leadership and competence, but at the same time, like also discuss the glass cliffs like presence. We think it's completely mutually exclusive, right? Because people either recognize that she's been trapped or recognize she's not been trapped, right? They can't like mutually exist. We don't see how both benefits can exist. We don't think that Sichi should be allowed to have the best of both sides. No, thank you. So look, let's go into each house. Let's go for CG first. So, but basically what they said is that a scapegoat is unlikely because this is usually the most qualified candidate because the company wants to like be better. Two levels of rebuttal. Note that the motion already assumes like a sexist perverse incentive behind the corporate decision, especially after the quarterly performances are like going down, right? We think that this already shows how this is a trap. This is not like a very good decision that is like very wisely prepared for, right, by the corporate board. But secondly, we don't dispute her qualifications, and we've never done that. But a recession means that many fiscal and monetary concerns are out of her control. Note that, but the general public with no expertise, professional, and insider knowledge doesn't necessarily know that, which means that it's very likely that we'll pin the blame on her. We don't see how CG can escape that. But note that secondly, when they say that women are strong and qualified, that there's a good chance of battling recessions, note that we should be realists, right? A recession isn't something that you can, even with good business acumen, easily escape out of. If it's a recession, it's most likely a nationwide or even global recession. That means that, for example, even if your firm is doing well, your parent firm might be actually buying credit default swaps that's directly against you, which means that even if you gain money, your parent company is going to take that money away from you. Know that on a cooperative board, or for example, deficient government stimulus, for example, the Dodd-Frank Act probably wasn't enough, or for example, there could be legislative gridlock that prevents you from getting the stimulus that you actually need, which means that even if that woman is professionally qualified and she's really competent, that doesn't mean really anything because she can easily be defeated by factors that are beyond her control. We don't see how that's relevant. Let's go into OG, right? Basically, OG gives us 4 things. Firstly, on how, if we turn it down, we can see women aren't fit to be executives, right? A, know that the trade-off is between scapegoating and a very high likelihood of the company not really internally disclosing all its corporate affairs to the world. Because note that it's probably not going to release a news press that, oh, this woman actually turned down this offer. That's not going to likely to happen, right? So we think that all harms of the public recognizing the refusal are now very tangential and most likely non-existent. No, thank you. But secondly, note that many other individuals, when they say many other individuals will be held accountable if it goes wrong, we think there are 2 levels of rebuttal. A, we think visibility and responsibility are disproportionately allocated to the CEO, as Kylie already explained, who represents the company's image and has a much more public profile, right? But also secondly, note that these analysts and other staff are most likely anonymous to the layman public and not accessible to people beyond academia or that expert field. So how will the public access the names? So obviously the CEO with the most recognition, the most visibility will be blamed. We don't see how this is even remotely disputable. But thirdly, note that when they say that X has an obligation to not make a selfish decision, we think that accusation is completely ludicrous. 3 levels of rebuttal. A, we think that we can't assume that countless women have sacrificed before her, as they said, because she could have sacrificed herself or also forgone a lot of alternatives, for example, a family life or even childbirth. Secondly, note that if there's really the sunk cost of these previous women's sacrifices, we think that this has all the more reason to refuse the job, to not backtrack from the progress they've made so that their advances were not in vain. So for example, the company's corporate culture and how this can justify misogynistic practices, those would actually materialize, right? But thirdly, we think that given how they say, we think it's completely unjustified. We think that this is the exact antithesis to X's and these other previous predecessors' lifelong pursuits of pushing women into positions of authority, right? We think on principle, this is not an acknowledgement of her ability. This promotion is a trap. But on practical, you also legitimize the board's position and undoes the progress and only confirms these misogynistic practices, right? We don't think that this is an obligation. We think this is completely selfish and completely dumb if she actually takes it. But before I go on, yes, POI from all.
If it's true that this company is so misogynistic and wants to pin the blame on a woman, the point in which you leave, why wouldn't they scapegoat a less qualified woman that will 100% or be more likely to fail in the end? And the harms will be symmetrical.
Thank you. We think that it's very likely that they're going to scapegoat women, whether it's qualified or more qualified. That's obviously a nuance that's up to every individual company. We don't see how that really has any relevant bearing in this particular motion. What we're saying is that regardless of the ability of the woman, given the recession, given the circumstances of recession, any woman is not likely to lead that company out of a recession and most likely into ruin, right? We mean that scapegoating is much more likely to occur in any scenario that OG comes up with. We don't see how this PR uniquely changes things. But more importantly, let's go to O, right? We already told you that very clearly how the mechanisms actually work, right? We think that when O tells you that, oh, it's justified to turn down, A, it's much less impactful than what we gave you. Secondly, they didn't really directly engage with OG's accusation of the decision being illegitimate because it's selfish. We think that what we told you was the actual elaboration between why the scapegoating argument is much more likely to work on our side. We told you the exact mechanisms and the nuances, and we actually explained how women is going to fare in such a recession unlike the other 3 houses, right? We think that given the unique situation of the corporate culture, we think that generally, when already suffering under misogynistic practices, buying into this trap is basically confirming these positions and showing how, oh, men are actually having more business acumen, men are actually more adept at handling these positions. We don't think that we should buy into this trap. Buy into this trap only gives them more fuel for these misogynist practices. We definitely have to avoid this trap. Very proud to oppose disclosing opposition.
I would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech and all of the debaters in this excellent round.